Good night, everyone. I really hope and pray that you have been having a blessed day. And even if you haven't, even if it doesn't feel blessed, even if it doesn't feel like it's been an amazing day, let me tell you something. You are in the right space. Virtual space, but the right space nonetheless. I am redeemed, and I am here on behalf of my sister, CEO, boss, owner, fierce woman of God, Sister Tanasia Durant, CEO behind the Dream LLC, CEO and founder of Married to Music. And we are here on behalf of the Married to Music organization to talk to grief survivors. Grief survivors. What can we say about grief? I mean, it's something that I don't think we ever really get over. And we're going to talk about that tonight. We lose loved ones. And in spite of us finding ways to cope with it, we never get over it. And we are blessed to have the skill set, the spirit, the anointing, the power of the Holy Ghost moving through our guest therapist, G Antoniette Smith. She was with us last week and has graciously opted to be with us again. And just a few things we're going to talk about: understanding grief. We're going to talk about not really ever getting over it. We're going to talk about loving and supporting your spouse through grief. We're going to talk about does time heal all wounds, right? We hear that all the time, but is that actually accurate? We're going to deal with myths about grief and sort of debunk and unpack some of those myths. And we're going to deal with the coping skills and tools when dealing with grief. All right. I'm going to pray us in, and then I'm going to get out your way because I'm not the licensed therapist. I'm not the licensed counselor, but I do have someone who is well qualified and can speak for herself. So I'm going to pray, then I'm going to give an introduction of our speaker, and I hope and pray that this is a time that you're able to heal, get closer to God, and understand grief at a much deeper level. Let's pray. Gracious and eternal God, almighty creator of the universe, you made us, you formed us, you fashioned us in your image and in your likeness. You fashioned us in a world that seems like we don't fit in. a world that seems like tragedy, bad news, and the repetition of grief perpetuates in the cycles of our emotions. And in spite of that ecosystem of grief, of pain, of tears, you still promised in your word that for our bereavement, you can turn it into dancing. Said that weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Your word tells us you will give us beauty for ashes, and we pray for every single person that's on this line grieving, every single person that's dealing with bereavement, whether it's a spouse, a loved one, dealing with unforgiveness just because they didn't know how to let it go, or they didn't know the right words to say before losing a loved one, and now there's guilt heavy on them. I pray now in the mighty name of Jesus that you anoint and use our therapist tonight to speak to the needs, to have eagle-eye vision into the hearts and into the conditions of these your people. Bring forth healing and deliverance. In the mighty name of Jesus the Christ we pray. Amen. All right, y'all. Listen, I have a dope woman of God that's on tonight, G Antoniette Smith. She is the owner and director of ETSA Solutions, LLC. You can check her out on Instagram. Check out the ETSA page, follow, and support the movement. She's a Christian marriage and family therapist. Listen, these are rare, y'all. Someone whose undergrad degree was in psychology. My master's is not, but my undergrad is. This is rare. It's rare to find someone that's a believer. So understand the gem that we have present with us tonight. All right. She's an international speaker and just a great woman of God with a warm spirit. So I introduce to some and present to others none other than G Antoniette Smith.
Hi, everyone. Wow, such a gracious, warm welcome, right? So, as many of you, for those who don't know me, as he stated, my name is G Antoniette Smith, and I am a marriage and family therapist, and I do provide individual, couples, family, and group therapy. And yes, grief therapy is one of the things that I do provide to those who fit in those categories, which is pretty much everybody, right? So just a recap, because I feel that it's important for for those who are just seeing me for the very first time, who may have heard or watched the previous video for last week. I want to just recap. But before I do that, one thing about me I love to do is I love to do icebreakers, right? And so today is going to be a little bit easier than it was last week. So for those who are tuning in, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, I want, if you are here again for the second time, say back at it again. And if you are here for the very first time to hear part 2, I want you to write first timer. So let's have some form of interaction. I like to see that because that has me to go and really see who's here. So hey, welcome back, ladies. All right, let's get it. Yes, I'm so glad that you have decided to come back, because as we know, grief, as we expressed last week, listen, it's not a game, right? Thank you. Thank you. Yes. All right. Sharita, thank you for being here for the very first time. Welcome. And if I butcher your name, forgive me, because I hate when people butcher my name. So I'm sorry. So, okay. Anyone else? All right. So thank you. Welcome back, Sonia, Kim, Inez, Megan, and Tanasia. Thank you so, guys. So I just want to say welcome. So I just want, hi, Heaven, welcome. So just so you guys know, I just a lady. So where's my man? There's no man here today besides brother that introduced me. What's going on here? Where's the man at? Y'all hiding? I promise you, I'm not gonna bite. Okay, so let me get into it. So I want to just do a recap of what we discussed last week. For those who hi Deanna, those who literally are just here for the first time. So I'm just going to go over the myths that many people state that are not true. I'm not going to go into detail, because what I want you to do is I want you to go back to part 1. Okay. So one of the myths that I like to debunk is that grief should last about a year. That is false. The pain of grief will go away if you ignore it or pray about it. False. If you don't cry, it means that you're not sorry about the loss. False. It is important to be the strong one in the face of loss. Now, for those strong persons, please listen to part 1 about that. Moving on with your life means you are forgetting the one you love. That is also false. So I'd like to discuss all of those different things. Let me see. Love that we're just in the midst. This is okay. Awesome. Yes. So these are different things that many people like to say to persons. And you know what? To be honest, when people are witnessing somebody that's going through grief, they just don't know what to say. And so we are here to educate you on just not being able to say. Most of the time when you're dealing with persons that are going through grief, the most important thing to do is to use your 2 ears. These things here. Let's utilize this, because when a person is going through grief, they themselves don't know how to process anything, right? Because you see blank most times, right? And so it's important not to promise and say, I'll be there for you if you need me, unless you're really going to be there. Right? And a lot of times within the first month or so, many people say that during a homegoing service or during a wake, hey, if you need me, if you need anything, call on me. Well, I don't need you to really be about that, right? Because one thing a person that's grieving does not need are empty promises. So if you don't know what to say, just say, I'm sorry for your loss, my condolences, hug them, and then that's it. Because once you say to the person, I'm here if you need me at any time. Now, if brother man or sis needs you at 2:00 in the morning, you need to be able to pick up that phone, right? So we don't want to give persons those kind of false promises, or hey, if you need anything financially, I'm here for you. And then they do need something financially. And when they call on you, your pockets are empty, right? So even though that those are words that we know that we may think that the person may want to hear, it's important for us not to utilize words and situations. So one thing is to ask, do you need anything from me? How can I be of help for you? Right? Because then you're allowing the grieving person or persons or a family to then tell you what they need. And if you're able to provide that, you say, yes, I can handle that for you. Okay, so it's very, very important. So I'm just going to touch on just a little bit, because I really want you to go back on understanding grief. Okay, and so as I stated in the first meeting with everyone, is that grief is an excruciating time, right? Many of us have learned the roles of how to be an adult. For some of us, how to go to school, how to go to work, how to move on, but not a lot of people are taught how to grieve, right? And since we're talking ministry, right, we know that in the church especially, and I'm saved, sanctified, Holy Ghost filled, fire baptized, I roll around, I jump around, I do all of that. But at the end of the day, the word of God himself gives us permission to grieve. Yes, right? He gives us permission to mourn, right? And so there is not he says a time. He doesn't say the day. He doesn't say the week. He doesn't say the year. He doesn't say the month. He said a time. So I want you to give yourself some grace. Give yourself permission to grieve. And you do not have to grieve like anyone else. You go through your process. Okay. So we want to do that. And I want everyone to remember that grief does not have one single emotion. Okay, grief is like waves, as I described it. For those who love the beach, I'm a beach bum or what have you. And when you go on the beach, you may want to put your foot in. You go into the water as deep as you feel comfortable. And sometimes you just want to feel that wave that hits you, right? And then when you realize some waves, when it hits you, it's soft. You know, you feel it, you recognize it. And then there's some ways that come and it literally knocks you off your feet. It's the same thing with grief. Grief has different ways on different days. Some days you may feel great, other days you may not. Some days you may feel confused, some days you may not. And so I want you to give yourself permission to feel these different things, okay? And so I want you to know also that grief does not only affect persons emotional, grief affects persons physical, their mental and spiritual. And I want you to check out part 1 so you can understand that. So the griefs that we first discussed were denial. That's usually where you hear the initial announcement of the person that has passed away and you feel shocked to your very bones, okay? And this is a stage where most emotions are profound, okay? So that's when you really feel everything. Then there's a stage called pain and guilt. And I'm going to explain to you why I say the stage, okay? Because I want you to understand that all of these stages that I'm stating are stages. There's no set time. Oh, this person's gonna go through denial. This person's going to go through anger next. This person's going to go through this, because no. For some people, when they experience a person that has lost or their pet or what have you, or their job, I need you to check out part 1, right? And really, you are not set to a certain type of stage, right? So I don't want you to say, oh, that person is in denial now, and then they're going to go to anger. No. For some people, when their parent or grandparent or sister or brother who may have had a terminal illness, when they actually see them pass on, they know that they were in pain. And so they may feel a sense of relief, especially if they've been a caregiver to this parent or this sibling or this person. Right. And so for some people, they may start with acceptance. Like, you know what? I accepted that this person has passed on. But now, months later, they feel the denial or the pain, as we stated. Right. And the pain stage is when this stage hits you right in your gut. It's just like a pow right into your gut, and the loss becomes extremely real to you. Okay. The next one is anger or bartering. Okay. Now, this stage, for example, is a stage when these feelings of anger or frustration may occur within yourself. Okay. Then depression. Okay. And so depression happens as well, where persons may feel that when they have a reflection of this person, and then they may start feeling lonely. And really, this is a time when individuals really reflect upon the loss that they've had. Okay. And then guess what? There's a stage called the upward turn. Okay. And now during this upward turn, this stage, you feel a little bit better, right? It means that you can actually have a form of conversation without the emotions being overtaking you, right? So you're able to say, yes, my mother has passed, whereas before, or my spouse has passed, or my child has passed. And whereas before, you're not even to say those words in a sentence, okay? Then you have the reconstruction and working through. And this stage is when you're starting to feel a sense of control. You begin to live life a little bit, and the grief is not overbearing. You're able to go to work, you're able to function and actually understand what's going on around you. Because a lot of times people, when their parents or grandparents or spouse, or even sometimes their pet has passed on, they go right back to work in the following week, and they're not ready to do so, right? And as I stated on last week, Jesus himself didn't even have that opportunity. When he heard about his cousin John getting his whole head cut off, there was a crowd waiting for him. Yes, right? And so literally, even when he tried to go to this desolate place, this secret place, there was still people waiting for him. And that's exactly how life goes, right? People are still waiting for you to show up. People are still waiting for you to push through when you can't even push through yourself, right? And so that's how life has gone. Then you have the acceptance stage, where down this is when you're able to accept, and you build the ability of hope within yourself. Like, you know what? My grandmother, she was amazing. And I have hope that, I know where she has gone. Right. And so those were what we discussed in detail. And I really need, for those who are there here for the first timers, I really need you to go back and watch. Okay. And so now I'm so glad my brother who introduced me, I'm so glad that he started off with the get over it. So I know I spoke about this last week, but I felt that it was so important for me to start on this topic today on the get over it. Right. You hear people that say to persons, you know what? It's been 7 years. You haven't gone over it yet? You're still going back to that place? You're out of order. You're out of order. No one should tell you how to grieve the person that you've known all your life, right? And for those who are out there who came last week that spoke about your parents passing away, that's a hard thing because your parents is all who you know, right? They're the ones who brought you into this world. And to actually go through that experience, some people feel like they've lost their family history, right? This person, this mom, this dad, this grandparent is a part of my lineage. And so when they go through that process, they begin to internalize, well, where do I stand? Who am I? Who am I now that my parent has gone? Who am I now that my grandparent has gone? Who am I now that my aunt who raised me because no one else was there? Am I now? Who do I reach out to? Right? I just literally, I just erased 4 people from my phone in my phone book. And no matter how many phones that I have gotten, their number just transferred right over. Okay. And it took me 7 years to remove this person from me. And today I did it. And when I did it, I knew in my heart that I actually had finally accepted this person is no longer here. And that took me 7 years. Yes. Right. And so what am I saying to you? Yes, your therapist, right? Because I like to be transparent, right? And it's important for you to know that I too know how it feels to lose somebody. I too know how it feels to hurt. I too know how it feels that you don't want to take a shower. You don't want to really speak on anything. You just want to be left alone. Right. And so I just want to say this, and you're going to see me look around because I like to keep my notes so I stay on track. Okay, everyone. And so when you hear things like that, statements of get over it, as I stated last week, I am not too keen on the word recovery. Even though I know many persons will use the word grief recovery to draw in persons, I don't feel that you can necessarily recover from grief, right? But what I do believe is that you are learning to live and cope day by day with grief. And day by day, it gets easier later from the time, not the initial time when the person has passed, but as months go on, it gets easier. Okay. And so I want you to really check out what I mean by get over it and why I don't necessarily agree with grief recovery. Okay. And now, so this is where we ended on grief triggers. My father passed away 3 years. Can you please put that up? And I still has his text message in my phone and number. I'm so glad you said that, Kim. Listen, if you have any messages, text messages, if you have any voicemails, keep those. Save it on your phone. Okay, save it on your phone because if you want to hear their voice, you're entitled to do that. Okay, so do that. So let's get into grief triggers. And so now, grief triggers, if anyone knows that's watching today, that's watching right now, do you know your grief triggers? If you do, put a thumbs up. If you know your grief triggers, put your thumb up. Let me see some thumbs up. And now, if you don't know your grief triggers, put a thumbs down. Okay. And that's fine. Either way is fine. As you, ladies and gentlemen, and those who are watching the replay, I love interaction. So it lets me know persons are engaged. Okay. Okay, I got some. All right, got some thumbs up. That's good, Deanna. Oh, it's good, Kim. That's really good. Okay, Megan. Okay. That's what I'm here to do. Okay, Sonia, that's good. Shalonda, okay, that's good. That's good. Teenage. Oh, okay, okay. All right. So that's good. Some of you know your grief triggers and some of you don't, right? And so that's fine. Okay, Sharita, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for participating. Can your triggers differ depending on who's passed? Absolutely. Why? Because you have different relationships with each person that has passed, right? And so some person, if your father has passed away, or your grandfather, or your spouse, or your brother, your uncle, and they had a certain cologne, you may smell it and it trigger you, to the point where you're crippled, versus that if that's another male, a co-worker male, has an apple, it's a different take. You're like, I'm not eating apples because that reminds me of my coworker. Every time we went to lunch, we ate apples. So absolutely. Okay. And so, just so for those who don't know, grief triggers are anything that causes you to literally revert into your grief without warning. So, meaning that you can walk down the street and you smell some pancakes, and it brings you right back to your grandmother and right back to when you heard she passed. Okay, most grief triggers are more commonly happens during milestone dates, birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. Okay, and so when it comes to milestones, invitations to weddings and graduations often trigger grief responses. Okay, so for those who may have lost their dad, or their grandfather, or their uncle, or their brother, this male figure, and they get engaged, it triggers them, right? Because they're like, wait a minute, I'm happy that I'm getting married. I'm happy planning, but who am I going to walk down the aisle with? Right? And that's real, right? Then you have those who may have different milestones, their graduation or their promotion, right? Where they've had this discussion, or them buying a new home, and knowing that the person that they would want to share that kitchen with and cut some cake or so forth, they're not there. Right. And so all of these different things, and throughout the years, it can cause significant pain when you've lost a loved one. So these are constant reminders. Holidays. Yes. Thank you, Sonia. Right. So definitely holidays does that. And as I said last week, well, I'm going to get into that in a minute. I'm going to get right into that in a minute. Okay. So grief triggers can also be favorite songs. Right? There's times when I'm at church and I hear a song, and even though everyone is crying, I'm crippled. And inside, I'm like, do not fall out and cry on this floor, go in the bathroom and sit on that toilet. And I'm not, just sit in the restroom and just wait till the song leaves. Right? Or different sounds I may hear. If I hear a Marvin Gaye, or if I hear Aretha Franklin, or I hear somebody, that can also bring. Or even grief trigger can be lost opportunities, right? Where that like when my aunt passed away, she had a ticket to go around the world, and she worked two jobs, and yes, she's Jamaican, you know how we do. And she didn't make it, and that was a lost opportunity at the time, because she was working so much, and she didn't get to go around the world the ticket that my cousin bought for her. And because of that, myself and my mother, we said we will travel. We will travel. We will not lose the opportunity to go to different places in the world that we've always wanted to go to and wanted to experience. But when I don't have the opportunity, like 2020, not having the opportunity to travel to different places was a trigger for me because I felt that was a lost opportunity. And I felt in a way that it was cheating me out of celebrating my aunt. Right. And no one knows that's how I felt because I'm actually sharing that still for my cousins who are watching, who I'm speaking of your mother. Yes. Okay. So let's get into steps on how to recognize your grief triggers because I think that's important. Okay. Steps on how to recognize the grief triggers. Okay. So step one, mark your calendar. Mark your calendar. What I mean is that I want you to mark all special days attributed to this person or persons or pet, okay? And I want you to plan for them by keeping them on your calendar. It will help you to better cope when the day arrives, right? So if you know Thanksgiving is coming up, and that time period is a time where you start to feel sad, I mark my calendar months in advance. So I know leading up to that day, I'm going to have something planned for that time, either to commemorate that person's memory or to do something that's outside of people and that can be with my special loved ones or by myself. And by doing that prepares you for that day so that if you're, let's say you're working and then that day comes and someone says it and you freak out, they won't understand. So to avoid the weight of that being on you, it's important for you to mark your calendar. Okay. 2, identify the trigger. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I want you to take notes of what's happening to make you feel that way. Okay, because once you recognize the smell of popcorn is going to trigger me, that means that if I'm going to a movie theater, my heart may be palpitating or I may not even recognize it. But once I see that there is the stand that deals with sodas, candy, and popcorn, I cannot go near there. Right. And so I have to prepare my mind. Am I ready to go to this movie theater? Am I ready to smell the popcorn? Is this popcorn going to trigger me? And if it is, then I will talk at the end about different coping mechanisms that you can physically do while you're going through this. Okay. Another thing in regards to identifying your trigger, once you become aware of your triggers, you're able to, as I stated, deflect the onset of the grief that you feel when you are triggered. Okay. 3, I want you to acknowledge your feelings. Okay, I already went through about the strong one and what that can cause in part 1. So please go back. All right. I want you to acknowledge and accept what you're feeling. Just like I stated to you earlier, the ways I want you to say, okay, right now I am feeling angry. I feel this is coming on me, or I feel like I need to be isolated. I feel this cloak of heaviness on me. And I want you to say that to yourself, because if you dismiss it and you ignore it and you tuck it away, it can come later at a more opportune time when it's unexpected. So by you acknowledging it, okay, you know what? When I'm in this building, I notice that I'm feeling something. What is that about? And when you link it back, okay, this reminds me of time that I used to be here with my loved one, or bring my pet to the park, or what have you, then you are acknowledging what you are feeling. Okay. Secret closet or special place. Number 4, it's important for you to have a place that you're able to go to that feels safe. Okay. It's important that because grief comes unexpectedly, you want to be able to plan out, for instance, all right, when my family's coming over for birthdays or holidays, it can remind me of the person who's no longer here. I may need time to go out to the car because they're all in the house. The music, the noise, the food, all of that is just too much. So let me go into the car. Let me sit down. Let me have my back straight and let me just breathe. Right? Do you notice that anytime you're upset, someone says, take a breath, right? And that is why. Okay. Number 5, practice positive self-talk. Okay. Why is that important? If you are speaking, even though you are going through your loss, but if you dismiss yourself and how you feel, or say, I am nothing, this person, I should die with them, and you have all these different kinds of hopelessness thoughts, is not helping your process to go through grief. Okay, even though it may come and may pass, but if it comes repetitive and you feel like this heaviness, this weight, this cloak is more than 6 months, 7 months, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's when you need to see a therapist, especially, okay? Because you may be going into depression. All right. And we don't want you to go into deep depression. So positive talk, self-talk includes being loved and kind to yourself. Instead of talking down to yourself or blaming yourself or feel guilty over the death of your loved one, speak about what they've done that has brought the best out of you. And that will help you to remember them in the most happiest way. If you know that your person was used to watch Sanford and Son, and that's funny, go watch that so you can have some form of laughter. Okay. Numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anticipate and minimize. Anticipate and minimize. So learning to anticipate your grief triggers beyond the calendar dates and other special days involves learning about different ways to remind yourself of your loss, right? And so what I mean is that if you anticipate when you're going to Thanksgiving is going to be so much, let the persons know, that your family members and so forth, like, listen, yes, you may start out like, okay, you're planning, you're cooking, you're making that potato salad, you starting that chicken, you're starting that collard greens, curry goat, for my Caribbean people, it's a curry chicken and all of that good stuff. And you're into the groove and so forth. And then you begin to feel yourself fade out, right? Everyone sounds like they're not there, and you feel like you're in a room by yourself. That's when you need to say, okay, I need to go and just take a moment. But also before that, forewarn your family, right? That I may not be able to handle this. And so if I'm not able to handle this, don't be surprised if I remove myself. Right. And that helps you, and that helps other persons to respect and understand that you're still taking it in. So for those who may be traveling and you're on your way going to down south or the Caribbean or up north, for those who may be watching from down south, you want to be able to have a plan B in case you going there, you're getting into the town, and it becomes like a rush where you feel like someone has literally sat on your chest and your chest is caving in. You want to have a plan B. What do I mean? Your exit. Okay. And I'm letting family members know this because sometimes we're like, no, come on. You can go. You can go. Right. Right. Exactly. Yes, you can do it. No, we just drove. We just took 2 planes. We just did a connecting flight, and now you want to go back. Yes, they do. So it's so important for you to plan ahead for that way of escape, and let your spouse and your family members know. So if that means you have to book a hotel and you stay there the whole time, you have to be able to understand that they're not ready. Okay. And sometimes we push people beyond the time that they're ready. And when they crumble, we don't know how to comfort them. And then we make it about ourselves. And it's really not about ourselves, right? You'll hear, well, I'm okay. Why isn't she okay? Right? Why isn't he okay? So that's not okay. So it's important for you to have a plan B. So when those days come, if you feel like being around friends, right? Then be around friends instead of family. If you want to be around someone that won't ask you questions, that will let you be who you want to be at that time, then that's who you are to be with. Okay. Now, another one, remain on course. Right. So that's important because staying on your course of your path of grief is going to be challenging at times, and you may have some setbacks, okay? But that doesn't mean that if you have a setback, that means you are back to the stage, of initially finding out, or that you're in a place where you're in the hole. Absolutely not. Remain the course of your grief. If today you feel angry, guess what? Feel angry. Let persons know, listen, right now, if you don't want to say the word angry, have a code word. Right now, I'm a number 7. I'm a number 9. So that person in your household, your friends, they know, like, okay, listen, Gidget is at a 9 today, so she's not picking up the phone. She does not want to be bothered. Yes, you may see me have 1,000 posts on Instagram or Facebook or what have you, but that does not necessarily mean I want to communicate with you on the phone or through text. I just may want to just do something at the moment to get my mind off and then go back to myself. And we have to understand everyone deals with grief differently. Okay. Which goes to my last one, gauge your reactions, right? Everyone does not grieve the same way, right? So if your brother and sister lost your parents, sister may shut down. Brother may go to work and work overtime, right? They may be grieving. Okay, it's in a different way. One may be a parent and one may look like they're walking in normal life, and that's not true. Okay, many people don't even realize that they're grieving. They think that, oh, because I'm going to work, I'm doing things, I'm stuff, but their mind is a different place. As I stated in part 1, when you grieve a parent, a grandparent, a close friend, you are not the same. You're not the same. When you lose somebody, you are not the same. I need everyone to say that to themselves. When I lost and you name whoever was dear to you, I am not the same. And so what am I saying for you to say that? Because I want you to recognize that if you don't go back to that place, which I don't think you will, it's okay. So don't allow someone else to make you feel that, oh, well, Gidget used to be on the phone a lot with me all the time. Now she's not. Oh, something's wrong with you. Why haven't you called? Da-da-da-da-da. Because I'm not the same, right? Grief will change people, which I'll get into the spouse, which we're about to go into right now soon. Now, one of the things I want to speak about is postponed grief, right? AKA delayed grief, right? And that occurs when a person has pushed off their grief reaction. They're the strong one. They put up a mental wall around their feelings so nothing can overwhelm them. They're handling it so well. They're smiling as people come by. People are saying, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good right now. Thank you. And they're not. Right. And so what happens is that this delayed grief reaction happens because you're not able to handle the weight of the grief emotion. Right. And so, or you lost the reality of your loss of the person right away. Okay. You may have been very young. I have clients who have lost their parents and they were like 6, 7, 8, 5 years old. So it doesn't, occur to them until later on. They may be a teenager and now they're going through their menses, right? And it's like, wait a minute, who do I talk to? My mom is not here, right? Because they had all their aunts, they had their cousins, they had their father, they had all this person. But it's like, wait a minute, who's going to help me? Even if they have a bonus mom, it's not their mom, right? And so it's like, wait a minute, who do I talk about these different things to? Okay. And sometimes people don't necessarily even discuss their family history medically, so they may not even know. Oh, I'm getting this, but I don't know where it came from. Why do I have red here? In my case, I dyed it, okay? But why do I have red here? Where does that come from? Why does my child have bluish eyes or brown eyes or what have you? Where did it come from? Because when I look at pictures, this person, sometimes their history goes with that person, so they're not even able to know that. So that loss can really, really affect persons to feel that they're not even connected with their history anymore. Okay, I'm still talking about postponed grief, folks. Okay, and then in case if it's traumatic, right, where a person had a car accident or they committed suicide, or different kinds of things where the grief becomes traumatic, where they're in shock and they're like, yeah, I know that person passed away, I know it's sad. And then boom, it hits them later on or in a moment, and they don't know how to handle it because they were able to plan out the whole going home away service, the wake. They were able to do the memorabilia in the paper or at the person's job, or hang up the postings in the person's buildings, and they're just moving and they're moving and they're moving and they're moving, and then it hits them later. Sometimes it happens 2 years later. Sometimes it happens 12 more months. Sometimes it happens 3 months. Sometimes it happens in 2 weeks. Okay. Another one is if a child, as I stated, right, if they're not able to comprehend a funeral. Sometimes kids don't even know that their parents passed because they're so little, right? And so so as they grow, they may feel the pressure that I have to be strong, because if my family sees that I cry for my mother, then they're going to feel guilty. I'm going to feel guilty that they, if I don't address them, or if I don't pass, then I'm not fulfilling what they've worked hard to help me with my mother with, right? Or father with, that has passed, right? I have kids who have lost their parents at such a young age, and they feel a load of guilt if they're not doing everything perfect. Because if I don't do anything perfect, then they're going to feel that they failed my grandmother, my mother, or whomever. Okay. And so they go into survival mode. Okay. And believe it or not, even adults may feel that. Okay. And so, especially if it's a loss, also, if it happens through a flood or tornado, it's very hard. It's very tragic how persons deal with grief, because it's like they could not do anything about it. So they feel guilty. Oh my gosh, if I would have just went and got my mother when, her and I last spoke, and all of those different things. Right. And so I just want to just say this. If you right now are feeling emotional based on what I'm saying, I want us to just take a deep breath. Okay. I want you to relax your shoulders, sit back, close your eyes, and I want you to take a deep breath in, a deep breath out, a deep breath in, and a deep breath out. Okay. And if it's too much for you, I want you to get up from where you are, and I want you to go away for a couple of minutes and then come back when you're ready, right? Because I want to be cognizant of that I'm not seeing you, so I don't know what's going on the other side of the camera. But if you are feeling overwhelming, I want you to get up. Do those deep breaths, and if it's not working, get up, get yourself a glass of water, give yourself a 10-second, or don't return whatever you're feeling at the moment, and then come back. Okay. And if you can't come back, it's okay. That's why this thing is being recorded. Okay. So let's talk about marriage and grief, because that's what they call me here to do, right? Let's talk about marriage. Let's get right into it. Marriage and grief. And so it's so important to know that when you're dealing with a spouse that has lost their parents or their guardian, right? That grief in itself, we already know, has the highs and the lows to grief, right? Because your life is literally changing and moments and times, right? And so when your spouse is experiencing a loss of a parent, this is when it really, grief literally shows, it rips off everything that the person may not have been even aware of who they are. Yes. Just like as we say a lot of times that marriage exposes, grief of a parent exposes a lot. And sometimes it exposes areas in that parent in the person that you thought was strong for you. And at that time when they lose their parent, they're not strong anymore. They're not strong for you or anyone else. At that time, things that they have may not have been able to overcome, it will show forth. Okay. It weighs on the person's physically. They may gain weight. Some may lose weight, right? Some may not even care how they look. Where this person you saw and who your partner, your best friend, the person that you joined to marry with, you look at them and you're saying, what's going on? I thought they would have been stronger than this, right? And you realize that the person that you're looking at, you didn't even know existed. Why? Because of what I said earlier. Grief changes persons, right? If a person sometimes, if they were raised in a strict family, or their family was very knitted and they did things and like in sync and so forth, and when grief happens, when that person is gone, now they're out there, they're either drinking, they're hanging out late, they're smoking, they're doing all of these different things that you've never experienced in this person, that's in your spouse. Okay. And then it can mess with them psychologically, right? Where they don't know who they are anymore. They're trying to figure out life. They're at work, but they're not at work. Where they were a person who was gun-ho and had a lot of tenacity, a lot of strength to move forward. They were the person that had it together. They were the fixer-upper, all of that. And now it's like, well, I don't care, do what you want to do, okay. Right? Because it's so hard to see your bestie, the person that you decided to share your life with, to go through so much pain. And it not only leaves them numb, but it also leaves you numb watching them go through this and being beside them. Right? And so I want you to know there's highs and lows, right? 1 minute they can appear okay, and another minute they're not. 1 minute they can appear engaged and have conversation with you, and another minute then they don't want to, right? Times where you would go out and eat and celebrate, they don't want to do that anymore. Okay, which brings me to discuss common norms during spousal griefs. Okay, common norms during spousal grief. One thing I want to say to everyone that has experienced a spouse that has lost a parent or a grandparent or their sibling, right? It's important for you to understand grace and forgiveness. Excuse me, I have to take a sip. So it's important for you to understand that during this time of grief, many spouses will experience the following from grief: crying, snapping or irritability, daydreaming, forgetfulness, repeating questioning, disorganization, isolation, perfectionism, inability to track time or conversations. Right? And so I'm letting you know that because sometimes we don't realize that. You're saying, well, why is that person why are you so snappy at me? I'm not, I didn't do anything. I didn't mean it that way. Right? That's a part of grief. Believe it or not, even forgetfulness. They may say to you, I don't know where I placed my keys. And you're like, it's right there. And they're like, oh, okay. Right. Or daydreaming. You're talking to them and it's like blank. Right. Repeated questioning. What did you, I'm sorry, what did you say again? And they come back, they walk away. Wait a minute. What you said? I didn't, I heard you, but repeat what you said. Right? Or inability to track time or conversations. So you can have a conversation with them and they're not cognizant of when you told them, and they're not able to track the conversation with you. So they get bits and pieces. Okay. And that's why it's important that during that time, sensitivity and patience is needed so that your spouse can feel supported by you. Okay. Keep in mind during this time of grief that they themselves are not aware of what's happening to their body. They're aware, they know it's happening. So, but they don't know their own responses is affecting you as their spouse going through it. Okay, because at that moment it's about them, their grief, their parent, the person who's raised them, and no one understands. Even if you are a sibling, how mom or how dad or how grandma or grandparent or how brother or sister dealt with me, they didn't deal with you that way. So we have a different, sometimes I don't know if you ever experienced this, everyone can be raised in the same household, but everyone can account for something in the same incident in a different way, right? And so it's important for you to understand that. So let's go into the denial stage, right? Encountering your spouse in a denial stage. As I expressed to you in part one, I went through the denial stage. So for those, once again, who's watching it for the first time, please go back so you can also mirror these two statements, okay? So when you're encountering your spouse in a denial stage, this is a stage when the emotions are most profound, okay? So I want you to know if your spouse is going through this, your spouse's thought process of denial is maybe like, this can't be happening to me, right? And they may have postponed grief, right? So don't force your spouse to acknowledge that their mother or father has passed, or grandparent or brother or sister has passed. What do I mean by that? Listen, Gidget, blah 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 has passed. Don't do that. Don't do that. Remember grace and sensitivity, right? Allow them to experience that. By forcing them in this stage to accept their parents has passed is without compassion, believe it or not. Yes. To force them to, your grandmother, you know, she was 99 years old. So what's your point? What is your point? Oh, you know, they had a long life. They lived a long life. I know that, but I want them to live their life with me right now. I want them to see their great grand. I want them to see and experience that. I want to be able to speak to them. Why are you telling me that they live a long life? How is that helping me right now? Right? Now, if you've ever experienced anyone saying that to you, please put a thumbs up. Right? During this stage of denial, understand that there's ripple waves, right? Remember, I was speaking about the oceans, right? And so this denial stage includes a wave of isolation where your spouse may actually want to lay in the living room and not in the bed, or lay in their kids' room on the floor, or lay on the floor and not want to sleep with you as their spouse. So I want you to know that this is not personal. It feels personal. It does, because you're like, honey, come to bed. And they're like, no, I'm watching TV, and they fall asleep. And then some persons may say, wait a minute, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? Why you don't want to be in this bed? what happened? I know your mother has passed, but I mean, we're still married. No. Mm-mm. Okay. Denial will come when they're unable to feel the full force of their parents being absent. And for those who may not be married that's watching this may happen with your siblings or your close friend, right? So I want you to know, anyone that is a loss or what have you, don't force them to accept that their mother, their father, their grandparent, their pet, their job, all of that. Do not force them to do that, right? Because they may not, in this stage, they have not comprehend that they have passed. And then they haven't actually felt the full force that their parent is no longer here. Okay. And so therefore, this denial serves like a blanket of protection. Okay. So if I don't tell my mind that this person is no longer here, it doesn't make it as real, or I won't feel the brunt of it right away. Okay. So I want you to understand that. Now, this is something that I want to say. For those who have lost their parent and or grandparent, and then your spouse now loses their parent for the first time, right? I want you to know that they may distance themselves from you as well. So I don't want you to say, well, I know how it feels. Remember, I lost my mother, I lost my father. Yes, they know that already. But their loss and their grief is different from yours. And to say that is literally making them feel like they cannot grieve, because you're now saying to them how to grieve for their parent, because you grieve for your parent, right? And so it's different because that's their personal. Remember, grief is a very personal experience. Okay. Now, I want everyone to know, those who are married that's watching, especially because I'm dealing with the married couple. So for those who are coming in, it said married to music. So it's couples primarily. So that's why I'm focusing on that. So I don't want anyone who's single say, oh, why she's only talking about that and so forth. I just want you to follow me. Okay. This can go for whether you're married or you have a best friend or a cousin or aunt or brother or sister. Okay. Now, this isolation sometimes, as I was stating earlier, when a spouse then separates themselves, where they utilize either work or they put themselves in a place within the house and becomes isolation, it can be very painful for your spouse to feel that. And I want to speak to the spouses that have experienced that their spouse is now going through loss of their parent, that this isolation that you feel from your spouse, please know it's only temporary. Okay, in this stage of denial, it's only temporary. And if you apply the pressure of them feeling guilty and so forth, it's going to cause the spouse to go into further isolation. Okay, especially during this stage. Okay, if I'm being helpful to you, ladies and gents, please put a thumbs up so I know that I'm making sense to you guys. I don't want to lose anyone. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Okay. So now if you're encountering the stage of guilt, right? So if you're encountering your spouse in the pain guilt stage, that's the stage when it first hits you that the loss is real. I want you to understand that when your spouse is experiencing this stage of pain, is both physically and emotionally. Okay. And so a lot of times during this time, they feel very isolated once again. And now the moment of shock has now worn off, and now they're feeling the pain, right? And if they have not had that, especially for persons who did not have that relationship with their parents, guilt will come on them as well. Okay. And so now where if they were a person that they spoke to their parents every day, every other day, and now this person is not going to call them as often because they're not here. Right. And so they may reminisce about the voice and the smell and the sounds of communicating with their parent. Right. And so this is very hard. So during this stage, when your spouse is going through this pain and grief stage, it's important that listening is essential in this stage. Okay. So I want you to keep in mind that they may wish they could have done this or that. Right. And so although the feeling can be overwhelming, they are relating to their natural emotions of guilt. And it's important for you to acknowledge these feelings as a part of their healing process. Okay. And so they need you to listen. All right. Sometimes you may have to ask them, do you want me to listen? This is a time that you want me to listen to you. And they may say, well, why, Yasmin? Just want to make sure. So I don't say anything, in case you have to verbalize that. Or you can just sit and just listen to them so that as they express how they feel, oh, if I would have done this or I would have done that. And some of it may sound like impossible things, but let them go through that time. Let them go through that expression. Okay. Because it's important for them to feel that, especially during times of their birthdays. Right. And so reminiscing and wanting. So that's why I said in the beginning, it's important for you to, yes, save those voicemails, save those texts, save all of that. Right. And so for that moment, if you need to hear the voice, you can hear for a moment. And yes, you may feel sad for a moment, but at least you may feel also comfort at the same time. Okay. Okay, so now going into encountering your spouse in the anger/bargaining stage, right? And so this is a stage where they may feel feelings of anger or frustration. Okay, so your spouse may feel if they grieve hard enough or pray hard enough, they may be granted one more conversation. And I know that may sound a little crazy for some who may not have experienced this, but it's true. Sometimes people feel like, you know what, if I pray, they'll come in my dreams, they'll speak to me and so forth. And if that happens, that can go into some other territories that I'm not sure if I'm able to speak about. But you don't want to encounter familiar spirits, okay? That's dangerous. All right. And so just know that the enemy, because it's a Christian ministry, I have to say this. I feel led to say this. Also remember, the enemy knows how you feel, may hear you speak of, oh, I wish I can hear, I wish I can speak to you, I wish I could do this, I wish, and so forth. And sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, so but you don't want him to enter into your metron and give you dreams, and that's a familiar spirit, and then you enter into divination through grief. Okay, I just want to say that. Okay, so understand during this stage, distorted thoughts may happen, right? That you feel like things can magically occur. Okay, and so most people, as I say, are not cognizant that these thoughts are not rational during this stage. Okay, and so their thoughts are, are racing and so forth. So when they're going through this anger and frustration and saying certain things, do not, as their spouse, do not ridicule or judge them. Okay, because this will phase. Right. So you'll find that during this stage of anger and frustration, you may find that they want to reminisce by holding things. So they'll hold items, physical reminders. They'll hold a pencil, a pen, a blanket, and different things. And you'll see that they'll go through this sometimes with their family members. Oh, you cannot sit on this chair. This was mom's chair, right? And they become very sensitive about that. And so during this stage, you don't want to point out, hey, listen, we don't need this couch right now. Right? We don't need this couch to be in our, we don't need this cap. We don't need this extra car right now. right? And so where you have some people that they would literally throw this out because they don't want to remember their parent in this man, some will actually keep it because they want to make sure that, hey, listen, if I get rid of this couch, that means I'm getting rid of my mother. I'm getting rid of my grandmother. I'm getting rid of my father. And even though for you as a spouse, as a friend, as a sister, brother's like, wait, I mean, but they're gone. That's not even logical. Listen, do not point it out that it's illogical when they're going through this, because what it'll do, it'll give them a reason that you're judging them, that you're telling them how to grieve, and then that'll make you frustrated, and then they get frustrated, and then everybody's frustrated, and then you feel like you have nothing else that you can do. Okay, so don't respond to the distorted thoughts that they have, like, like I stated, if I get rid of this, then that means that. Okay, so meaning, like, don't say judgment thoughts like, your mother and or father, or whomever, they were Jesus, right? So they won't be able to do that right now. No. Okay, don't go there. Okay, and so you don't want to say to them, oh, you're torturing yourself by keeping this here, the state of mind that you're having, and this and so forth. No, don't do that. Okay, so instead say things like, it would be, yes, I agree, it would be a true gift, if they were here again. You want to agree with them in regards to the feel. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, that would. I like how that reminds you. Yeah, I remember when mom would be on that couch. I remember when dad would use that pen, right? You don't want them to feel like by them holding that memory is something crazy or their reasoning is crazy. You don't want to do that. Okay. Encountering your spouse in depression, reflection, loneliness stage, right? This is the stage when your spouse reflects upon the loss, okay? And so this stage is where they express how this experience has affected their life, right? And so sometimes this can happen, days at a time and so forth, sporadic and so forth. But I want to say this, that sadness is an illicit emotion, right? And it doesn't persist more than a day, week, or and so forth. Okay. Now, depression now is sustained physical and mental experience. Okay. And what I mean by that, it literally, this stage will alter your thoughts, your behavior, your physiological process. So you may feel like you're eating a lot, you want to sleep, and so forth. You get extremely tired. And so people, I just want to say this, people don't snap out of depression. So don't tell people to snap out of it, because that's not real. Okay. And so they during this stage too, you can have negative feelings about your esteem, you may, or how you look, your marriage, or if I don't measure up to what my dad said I would be, I don't measure up what my mom said I could be, or I'm not as good as my mom, I'm not as good as my dad, I'm not as good as a cook as grandma and grandpa, and so forth. And it can weigh on the marriage, because now if your spouse is starting to say that, it will affect your marriage, okay? Especially depression, right? Because during depression, you feel lonely, you feel frustrated, right? And now your spouse is doing that with you, and they don't want to engage with you. They don't want to engage with the children. They don't want to engage with their social circles. They don't want to engage with faith communities, okay? So it's important for you as their spouse to educate yourself about depression. Okay, so if not the thoughts, like him or her, to get over and snap over and and say, okay, well, where's this marriage going? Right? We're here, we're alive. You don't see that we're here, we're alive, we're at the table? No. Okay, I say to you, I admonish you to remember to pray. This is the time. you need to pray for strength. You have to pray for grace. You have to pray for wisdom, especially when your spouse is going through this stage of depression, reflection, and loneliness. Okay. Prayer and patience is extremely important in this stage, right? Now, I don't want you to overdo it. Okay, so I don't want you to overdo positivity or ignore your spouse altogether, right? Because sometimes people don't know what to do. So they'll start saying over stuff like, oh, baby, you're doing a great job. Oh, yes. And you never used to do that, right? And so your spouse is going to be like, okay, you're overdoing it. I can't, right? And now if you ignore your spouse, then they're going to feel like, wait, you don't care about me right now. I'm going through this. You're leaving me by myself, right? So sometimes it's a catch-22. So you have to go through prayer. You have to have patience, right? And so I want you to remember, because sometimes when we take our vows, persons forget the worst, better or worse, sickness or in health, right? And so, and a lot of time, your family, your members and spouse, when they go through death and grief, they go through different kinds of sicknesses. Sometimes it's the sickness of, I don't want to be around you. Sometimes it's physical sickness where they can have heartburns, or like I said in part one, inflammation in their joints, or, different things can come on persons when they are going through grief. So it's important for you to remember your vows, because sometimes we remember saying it, but remember the words that you said, right? That you will be with them through all things, right? You will be with them through the experience. And so even during the tough times, and it's tough, it really is tough, especially during the stage. Now, if you see that your spouse is going into a depression where it becomes deep, that's when they need to see someone, a mental health clinician. Okay, because you don't want that your spouse goes into a depression and they can really get help. Okay, so I have to say that. All right. Now let's get into the upward turn. Okay. This is the stage when you start feeling a little bit better. Okay. And so it's a little less plain. And here your spouse is feeling a little bit better. I don't want you to push them more than what they can do. So you're like, oh, they're feeling good. They're going out. Let's go. Hey, let's go here. Let's go there. Let's go on a trip. Let's bring it down. Bring it down. You want to be cautionary in this stage in regards to how much you can do, right? So if they, like I stated to you earlier, if they agree to go to Thanksgiving to auntie's house or whoever's house, pay attention to the dates. Ask them if they're aware of their grief triggers, right? And if they're not, say, okay, how have you been feeling? And so forth, because you want to check in. All right. Now, reconstruction and working through. This is when the stage when your spouse starts to feel a sense of control. Now, this stage is a little bit tricky. And the reason why I say that is because during this stage, this is when they're really getting back into the bustle and hustle of things. And you want to be mindful to ask their spouse to pay attention and keep in mind their level of what they're going through. Because during this time, they're now rebuilding. They're now learning how to really move into the next stage, which is acceptance, right? They're being able to really go through, okay, mom has passed, dad has passed. Okay, I got to keep moving. Some days may be hard, some days may be easy. So you got to remember that this stage is a little bit tricky because they can revert back to anger. They can go back to denial and so forth. It doesn't mean that they're in those stages. It just means that something may trigger them back to those stages, okay? And now, last, acceptance, right? The stage to your ability to accept. So you have recognized that your spouse recognizes that, you know what? Yes, mom has passed. I know mom is passing. They're able to talk about things and so forth. And they're able to talk about without shutting down or shutting you out. And they become, back to themselves where they want to connect with you. It's important for you not to feel like, well, now you want to connect with me. Like when I was trying to connect with you for the past 2 months, you kind of shut me out and so forth. No, don't do that, because then you'll bring them back to that place of, isolation, and trigger. Okay. And so I'll be remiss if I don't tell you, listen, if you are experiencing any of this stuff, it's important for you, especially Christian folks, you can have Jesus in therapy. I said that in the last time. It's so important for you to realize that. And when you're going through this with your spouse, you don't have to go through it alone. Sometimes you need to speak to somebody. And I have no shame in my game. They have my handles. They can put it up if they want. If you are seeking to do grief therapy, yes, feel free to contact me and so forth. And so I just hope that everyone learned something today with these past 2 weeks in regards to grief. I want you to show grace to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. And for those who are watching the replay, thank you. I say that everyone that's here now and those who are watching replay, you have overcome one thing. You have actually accepted that the person that you love has passed on, and you're accepting help, and you're accepting information that not only for you to hold, but for you to pass on to others, and for you to also pass on to your spouse. Okay. And so I just want to say thank you so much. And I want you to listen, follow Married to Music for those who are, just learning about this ministry right now. Follow them. They have a passion for those who are in ministry, for those who are doing things and really getting into uncharted territories. And so I pray that God will not only bless this ministry, but I pray that God will do wonders. I want you to look at the @official Married to Music on Instagram. I follow them. They have great artists that come and sing and do different opportunities. I see that they're about to have a gala on 11/11. That number is a powerful number, by the way. So I pray that the Lord will just magnify himself. And once again, my name is G Antoniette Smith, and I say G Antoniette Smith, and I see you whenever. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Love, oh love. Love's a wonderful thing when you have it in your heart. Love, oh love. Love is patient, love is kind. Gotta do this loving right. L-O-V-E, talking about you and me. Everybody say yes. Can we spread the love with the world needs today? Oh yeah, talking about you and me. Everybody say yes. Oh yeah. Love, oh love. Love empowers, love is pure, and we need it more and more. Love is patient, love is kind. Gotta do this loving right. L-O-V-E, L-O-V-E, talking about you and me. Everybody say, can we spread the love? What we need today? Love, oh love. Yes, love is perfect, and it's kind and it's good. Spread love. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore. Hey, oh, very deeply stained within, seeking to rise no more. Come on, sing it right here. L-O-V-E, talking about you and me. Everybody say, can we spread